Good evening, my fellow Americans. I am Royal Alexander, and on behalf of the Red River Tea Party in Shreveport-Bossier, Louisiana, and patriotic Americans everywhere, I thank you for being with us this evening. In a few hours, President Obama will deliver his State of the Union address to the nation. He will declare that the state of our union is sound. But is it really? Is the state of our union really sound? Millions of patriotic Americans rose up on November the 2nd of last year and stated in a clear voice that we don't think our union is sound, we don't think our economy is strong, and we don't think our borders are safe. These same voters were very clear about what is expected. Mr. President and Congress, we demand you shrink the size of government. As President Reagan so wisely told us, government is not the answer to the problem, government is the problem. And on that note, Mr. President, do not raise the federal debt ceiling. Is $14.3 trillion not enough national debt? Some of the best alternatives to raising the federal debt ceiling would be for Congress to, number one, repeal Obamacare. It is an unmitigated medical, health, and economic disaster. We demand it be repealed, and I will address more about that in a moment. Eliminate some farm subsidies. We will still have farming in America. Abolish the Department of Education. Our communities will still have schools because not one bureaucrat working at the Department of Education is in a classroom. Close the Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD has not even built as many homes as Habitat for Humanity and other groups. Shut down the Department of Energy. Power plants and oil companies produce energy, and they don't rely on the Department of Energy to do it. And here's a novel idea, Mr. President and Congress. Let's balance the federal budget of $1.3 trillion and live within it, as every American family must do. Senator Rand Paul has introduced a balanced budget amendment that will require a supermajority to raise taxes. We insist that it be passed and signed into law. And Mr. President, no more bailouts that undermine the free market. And Congress, stop exempting yourself from the burdensome and onerous laws you impose on the rest of the nation. To that end, we support a 28th constitutional amendment requiring you to live under the laws you impose. And no more crushing federal regulations that suffocate small and medium-sized businesses that are the backbone of our American economy. And no more card check imposed by the heavy hand of union leaders who seek to reverse the requirement of secret ballots in union elections and thereby be in a position to intimidate their members who dare to think for themselves. No card check. And Mr. President, we have thus far defeated cap and trade, also known as cap and tax. Mr. President, we now demand that you not thwart the will of the American people by going around the legislative process and having the EPA impose these same or even more draconian carbon taxes and regulation on the American people. Mr. President, no nation can be a sovereign nation if it cannot control its own borders. We demand you secure our borders. That is a fundamental obligation of the federal government that has been neglected too long. There are drug cartels on the Arizona side of the border. It is no longer only illegal immigrants coming across America's borders who simply seek to work in our country. Today, terrorists who intend to do us harm also enter our country illegally. This must be stopped if we are to be secure. And regarding illegal immigrants themselves, we say loudly and clearly that we are a nation of immigrants, a melting pot. However, there is a legal process for becoming an American citizen, and we demand that it be followed. Returning for a moment to Obamacare, Mr. President and the Congress, I say again, we do not want socialized medicine. We simply will not accept it. We want this health care law repealed immediately, House, Senate, and Presidency. We do support targeted health insurance reforms such as portability across state lines, restrictions due to pre-existing conditions, associated health plans, and the pooling of coverage, and medical savings accounts. But again, we do not want and will not accept having the federal government run our health care. Mr. President, we also do not want and will not accept having the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, targeting and reining in conservative talk radio programming. That is clearly censorship, and we will not stand for it. My fellow Americans, many writers and political pundits have tried in recent months to analyze and dissect the Tea Party phenomenon sweeping the nation. The answer is really quite simple. We are citizen patriots in the traditional sense of those words. We don't feel government knows better than we do how we should live our lives. We think we the people do. We are weary and fed up with the intrusion of the federal government into every aspect of American life, continually flouting the will and the consent of the governed. We are fearful of trillion-dollar deficits and how they undermine the very vitality of the American economy by stealing from the workers to allow the government to buy the votes of select special interests. And while many of us may not be able to explain the complexities of the Federal Reserve, although we do know it needs to be audited, we all clearly understand the generational theft that is now being perpetuated by the government under accounting rules that put Bernie Madoff and the Enron executives in federal prison for many years. And we do grasp that our grandchildren will be $36,000 in debt the moment he or she is born. We also believe that the government should return to its fundamental obligations under the first principles of the Constitution, providing for a common defense and ensuring domestic tranquility, rather than spending our hard-earned tax dollars on the mating habits of fish, the genetics of grapes, the odor of pigs, sacrilegious and offensive so-called art that is pornographic and funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, and now, with the new health care law just passed, the very real possibility of taxpayer funding of abortion. Further, as I noted earlier, while we favor targeted reforms, we also think the new health care law is unconstitutional because, among many other things, it imposes a mandate, unprecedented in our history, that virtually every American purchase health care, whether they need it, want it, or morally oppose some of the uses made of the money they are forced to pay for it. We do believe deeply in our U.S. Constitution, which we feel is being violated daily with impunity and indeed mockery, and that it means what it says, that the First Amendment's promise of religious liberty extends to all of us and is, in truth, a freedom of religion rather than a freedom from religion, that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed is real and clear. We also believe that the powers of the federal government are limited and derived from the states, and that the 10th Amendment's command that those powers not expressly granted to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people is not merely a suggestion. We believe that fundamentally, Mr. President and Congress, those powers not expressly granted to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people under the 10th Amendment. and we demand you pass legislation that comports with that tenet. Many have criticized our Constitution as being outdated and irrelevant because it was written over 100 years ago. How short-sighted and foolish. Some writers have observed that by that standard, Moby Dick, Pride and Prejudice, Shakespeare, and the Bible have also passed their expiration dates. While it is true that the founders could not have anticipated what modern America would look like, that is no answer at all. Our founders laid down certain principles to guide us into the future, and these principles transcend every generation. As with Scripture, the Constitution is based upon eternal truths. We have also been criticized by some in the national media as being hard-hearted or mean-spirited towards our fellow Americans for demanding that we reduce the size of government. So let me be clear. We will always support our elderly who have paid their dues and upon whose back this country was built. We will always support our veterans who shall have borne the battle for our freedom. We will always support our national defense and the truly needy and handicapped as part of our moral obligation. No, our focus is on the insane and reckless spending that threatens our national vitality and security, and on that, we are not backing up. It is important to appreciate that many in the National Tea Party movement have never been involved in the political process before. While we have some Democrats and Republicans in our ranks, the largest number of our members are independents. And we also have libertarians, as well as a few Constitution Party and no party folks. We are made up of blacks, whites, Hispanics, and Asians. We are men, women, and children. We have single people and married. We have attorneys, doctors, single mothers who bring their children to our rallies, female business owners, blue-collar, and retired veterans. We have some members who focus more on fiscal issues and some who focus more on social and religious ones, and we welcome them all for their diversity. Finally, while we know America is not perfect, we love her and firmly believe she is great and that the world would be a much darker place without America in it. You see, while the Tea Party movement may appear leaderless, a fact that drives crazy those who would presume to attack us, we are not disorganized, and we all think for ourselves, rather than acting blindly on orders issued by an unelected czar who is unaccountable to the American people. We are truly the definition of a grassroots movement, and we are not going away. Thank you again for being with us this evening. We urge you, we beseech you, we implore you to join us in this fight for our country. God bless you and your families, and God bless the United States of America.